He really wanted to go to school. He planned on working for 3 years to gather enough money to attend university. 3 years later, Jude woke up one day feeling so excited. He had taken out the box where he saved all his money, counted it, and found it was up to 4 million naira. Jude was overjoyed. He had saved enough to go to school the following year. He had just 1 more year to apply to the university to study law and become a lawyer. One day, Jude was coming back from work in the evening when he met Sarah.
Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, like, share, and comment. And as a matter of fact, I love you all.
Many years ago, in a city known as Greenville, there lived a young man named Jude. Jude was an orphan. His parents and siblings had all died in a car crash when he was only 4 years old. Jude had to live with his uncles and, over a span of just 15 years, had lived with over 3 different uncles. Jude was always sad because his uncles' wives treated him very badly, and his uncles did nothing about it. When Jude was only 18 years old, he ran away from his uncle's house and started living on the streets. He began doing several manual jobs, going from home to wash clothes and collecting waste for disposal. He would also go to the market to help people carry loads for a fee, just to make ends meet. With the little money that Jude earned, he took care of himself. Jude was determined to give himself a better life. He did not want to continue living on the streets. He wanted to become someone important, so Jude vowed that he would further his education and become a lawyer, no matter what it would cost him. Jude saved as much money as he could, spending very little on himself. In a span of 5 months, he was able to rent a very small room, finally having a roof over his head. Jude continued to save and bought many books. Every night, whenever he came back from working all sorts of menial jobs, he would read as much as he could. He really wanted to go to school. He planned on working for 3 years to gather enough money to attend university. 3 years later, Jude woke up one day feeling so excited. He had taken out the box where he saved all his money, counted it, and found it was up to 4 million naira. Jude was overjoyed. He had saved enough to go to school the following year. He had just 1 more year to apply to the university to study law and become a lawyer. One day, Jude was coming back from work in the evening when he met Sarah. Sarah was only 15 years old and was coming back from lessons. She had completed her secondary school education and was attending extra classes to prepare for her JAMB exams and secure admission into the university to study law. One of the books Sarah was carrying caught Jude's attention, so he approached her and said, "Hello, I see that you have this government book by Patrick Richard. I love it so much because it's so easy and simple to understand," Jude said excitedly. "Oh yes, I do, but you didn't bother introducing yourself to me." "My name is Sarah." "What's your name?" Sarah replied. "I'm so sorry, Sarah. My name is Jude. I love to read, and as soon as I saw you carrying that book, it caught my attention, and I knew I had to come say hello," Jude replied. As they continued talking, Jude found out that Sarah also wanted to become a lawyer, just like him. He was thrilled. Sarah was the only daughter of her parents, with a younger brother named Victor. Her parents were both traders at the market, and although they earned very little, which was barely enough to provide for their family, they valued education greatly and would do anything to see their only daughter, Sarah, through school. Sarah was very intelligent, and her parents wanted to support her dream of becoming a lawyer. Even though they did not have the money at the time to pay for her university education, they let her take the examination while they hoped and prayed for a miracle to pay their daughter's school fees. As the days passed, Sarah and Jude became very close friends. They hung out more often, chatting and laughing, and also read books together. Jude fell in love with Sarah. He loved her very much, and they started dating. From the little money Jude made, he would always buy a gift for Sarah, no matter how small. Jude would visit Sarah in her parents' house, and her parents really liked him because he was well behaved and had a good influence on their daughter. Even though they spent time alone in his apartment every evening after Jude had closed from work and Sarah was back from her lessons, Jude never kissed or tried to have intimacy with Sarah. Even when Sarah wanted it, Jude would always refuse, telling her that he did not want to ruin her life. He didn't want her to get pregnant or be distracted from securing admission into the university. One evening, Sarah came into Jude's room, screaming and shouting excitedly, "I passed. I passed. I have gained admission into the university to study law." Sarah screamed. Jude was so happy, he immediately grabbed her excitedly and said, "Congratulations, my love. I knew you would pass with flying colors and gain admission." Later that evening, Jude took Sarah out to celebrate her success in gaining admission into the university. They were both so happy. 3 months later, it was time for Sarah to go to the university, but her parents had not been able to raise the money for her school fees. The total amount, including her school fees, acceptance fee, and other charges for new students, was about 1,300,000 naira. However, they had only raised 130,000 naira, and it was barely a week until the deadline for Sarah to pay her school fees, or she would lose her admission. Sarah's parents were very sad. They stayed awake most nights, discussing their situation. They were worried sick about their inability to pay Sarah's school fees. One night, they called her to speak with her. "Sarah, I am so sorry. Your mother and I are unable to raise the money for your school fees. We have tried our best, we reached out to your uncles and even tried to take a loan, but nothing seems to be working out. You may need to wait till next year," Sarah's father said, looking so sad. Sarah immediately broke down in tears. That night, she could not sleep. She stayed awake all night, thinking and crying. She knew her parents had tried their best, but she really wanted to go to school that year. The following day, Sarah ran to Jude's house, crying and narrating her predicament. Jude tried comforting her as much as he could, telling her that everything would be alright. Throughout that day, Jude couldn't go to work. He stayed at home, thinking and pondering over everything Sarah had told him. He didn't know what to do. Jude knew he had up to 4 million naira saved, and he knew Sarah really wanted to go to school. But he also planned on going to school the next year. He loved Sarah very much and couldn't bear to see her in misery. Jude was torn between his love for his education and his love for Sarah. Jude decided to call Sarah to come over to his house so they could talk. "Sarah, do you really love me?" Jude asked. "Of course I do. Why would you ask such a question?" Sarah replied. "Sarah, would you want to marry me when you graduate from the university?" "What kind of questions are you asking me?" Sarah replied. "Of course, I do. I even want to marry you now. You know how much I love you," Sarah responded. "Sarah, you know that I'm an orphan, but I've always wanted to be a lawyer. Since I started working, I've been saving most of the money I make so I can pay for my school fees, as there's nobody who can help me once I gain admission into the university," Jude said. "Okay," Sarah responded. "So, I was thinking that instead of going to school next year, I should use the money I've saved to pay for your education. When you graduate, we can both get married, and when you start working and earning money as a lawyer, then I can go back to school, and you'll pay for my education. What do you think?" Jude asked. "It's a wonderful idea," Sarah said excitedly as she ran and hugged Jude. "Thank you so much, Jude. Thank you so much. I promise you that as soon as I graduate, we are going to get married. As soon as I start earning, I'll send you back to school, and by then, I'll be earning a lot of money as a lawyer, so we won't even struggle to pay your school fees. Thank you so much, Jude. You're the best thing that has happened to me." Thank you, Sarah said, crying. Sarah then told Jude to follow her home so she could tell her parents everything Jude had done and their agreement to get married as soon as she graduated from school. Her parents thanked Jude profusely, and her father and mother asked Sarah if she was sure she loved Jude and wanted to marry him after school in 5 years. Sarah assured her father that she really loved Jude. Her parents were happy because they already liked Jude very much, seeing him as a responsible young man. So, our father brought out some gin, poured it into a cup, blessed it, and said, "This drink signifies that I have accepted you as my son-in-law. But I do not want you to touch my daughter yet, she is not fully your wife. Let her focus on her education and graduate. Then you both can do what married people do. But I give you this drink to affirm that she is your wife, and whenever you come officially to ask for her hand in marriage after 5 years of university and 1 year of law school, I will bless your union. As you have promised to take care of her education until she graduates and becomes your wife, may God bless you and provide all that you need," Sarah's father said, and they all said, "Amen." That night, they all drank and made merry. Jude went home very happy, and Sarah also slept with joy. Her parents were excited that they no longer needed to worry about her education. Now, they could focus solely on Sarah's welfare and studies. In the next few days, Sarah was off to school. Jude felt a mix of sadness and happiness for her. They spent quality time together the day before she left. He encouraged her to study hard and promised he would work tirelessly to provide everything she needed. All Sarah had to do was focus on her studies and aim to graduate with flying colors. Sarah began her university life by attending lectures and studying diligently. Jude, on the other hand, worked even harder. He doubled his efforts and, with all the money he could gather, sent Sarah funds every month for her feeding, books, hair, new clothes, and general upkeep. Sarah never lacked anything in school and lived comfortably. They communicated frequently, and each time school closed for the holidays, Sarah would come home and spend quality time with Jude. They would laugh and chat about university life. Jude would read all the law books Sarah brought home, and Sarah would explain anything he didn't understand. When it was time for her to return to school, Jude would always provide her school fees and take her shopping at the market. This continued between Sarah and Jude until her final year. Then, suddenly, Sarah changed. She no longer picked up Jude's calls when he tried to reach her at school. Instead, she would send a text saying she was busy. Even when she came home at the end of the session, she didn't bother visiting Jude. He would only find out she was back when a friend saw her in the market or on the streets and told him. Jude decided to visit Sarah at her home but was met with a very cold reception from her father. "Good evening, Papa," Jude said politely. "How can I help you?" Sarah's father replied coldly. Jude was surprised. "Oh, I'm so sorry for coming unannounced, Papa. I heard that Sarah came back home, and I've been trying to call her, but she's not picking up. She seems to be avoiding me." Jude looked concerned. "Well, if she's not picking your calls or if she's avoiding you, then it means she doesn't want to speak with you. Please respect her decision. And if you have nothing else to say, I think it's time for you to leave," Sarah's father said angrily. Jude was surprised but took his leave, wondering why Sarah's father's attitude had changed and what he had done wrong. A few days later, Sarah returned to school without even seeing Jude. This time, she didn't pick up his calls or even send a text. She had blocked Jude so that he couldn't reach her. Jude was so frustrated he became a shadow of his former self. A few months later, Sarah finally graduated from university but completely ghosted Jude. He had paid her school fees from the first year to the final year, bought all her law textbooks, and provided money for her feeding and clothing for 5 years. Jude was terrified, hoping it wasn't what he feared. His friends had warned him and mocked him for sponsoring a woman who wasn't yet his wife, but he didn't listen. Jude was heartbroken. When Jude found out that Sarah had come back home, he started keeping an eye on her house. He began to notice that a very wealthy man named James frequently visited Sarah's house in his beautiful car, always bringing gifts for Sarah and her family. Sarah would come out, kiss James, and enter his car, and they would drive off while her parents stood by, waving goodbye. Jude was devastated and wept all day. Sarah and her family had completely cut him off. Jude had spent more than 8 years of his life savings on Sarah's education. He had forfeited his own education for hers. Now, he was not only broke with no savings, but he also had no education, and Sarah had left him for another man. Jude was heartbroken. One day, frustrated and desperate, Jude decided to confront Sarah and her family. He monitored Sarah closely, and one day when she came back from an outing with James, Jude immediately came out from his hiding place and started shouting, "Sarah, how could you do this to me after all I've done for you? Mama, Papa, you promised I would marry your daughter after she graduated. Now you've cut all ties with me. Sarah, after I spent my life savings sending you to school instead of sending myself to school, this is how you repay me. This is how you repay me." Jude screamed. Sarah's father tried to stop Jude from making a scene in front of James, their future son-in-law, but Jude would not budge. He kept on screaming like a wounded lion. Sarah shouted, "What is it? I'm sorry, but I do not love you anymore. I was only a child, just 17 years old, when I promised that I would marry you. Look at me, I am all grown up now. I am no longer a child, and my tastes have changed. Besides, I am now a lawyer and will be going to law school next year to become a barrister. How can I get married to a man who carries loads on his head in the market or goes from house to house carrying people's waste? I'm sorry, Jude, but try to understand me. See, I'm willing to pay you back all the money you have spent on me since we met 5 years ago, and I could even add a little interest. I am sure that my fiancé, James, the man of my dreams, is willing to pay you back even more than what you have spent on me," Sarah said, turning to look at James lovingly. James was shocked. "Wait, Sarah, why am I just hearing about all this now? You never told me you had a boyfriend, not to talk of a fiancé who saw you through all the way from your first year till you graduated. I can't believe this. And for you, Papa Sarah and Mama Sarah, to say that I'm disappointed is an understatement. And you, Sarah, what you did was very unfair. How can a man train you through school, and you dump him just like that? I'm so disappointed in your whole family," James said as he entered his car and drove off. Baby, it's not what you think," Sarah cried out as she ran after his car. "You, this stupid boy, see what you have caused. How you have ruined my daughter's chances of getting married to a wealthy man who would have taken very good care of my daughter and my family and rescued us from the shackles of poverty." Papa Sarah shouted angrily at Jude. That night, Sarah could not sleep. She kept calling James, but he refused to pick up. She was so worried. The following day, James arrived at Sarah's house very early to see her and her family. "I am so sorry, Papa Sarah, but I cannot continue with this marriage. You may wonder why I am not yet married, despite how successful I am. It's because a young girl, just like your daughter Sarah, did exactly the same thing to her boyfriend, Jude, that she did to me. I trained this girl in school many years ago, and she dumped me to marry a richer man. It shattered me, and I was in a state of depression for years, finding it very difficult to trust any woman. That is why I swore that I would only marry a woman who has already graduated from school, and that I would never train any woman in school again. That was why I came to you, Sarah, because you had already graduated. And here you are, my future wife, still doing the same thing to another man. You girls and your parents, who encourage this nonsense, need to be taught a lesson. If not, you will never stop using men." Immediately after speaking, James left the house. Sarah quickly walked behind him, crying and begging. Her parents also followed, begging and crying, asking James to forgive them. But James did not even look back at them. As James left their house, he asked people around if they knew where Jude lived. They directed him to Jude's house. Jude was surprised to see James at his door. James introduced himself and narrated all that he had told Sarah and her family, explaining that he himself had been a victim when he was younger. He had trained a young girl in school, and when she graduated, she dumped him, saying she was now a graduate and he was not, so he was not good enough for her. James told Jude that despite his success, he had not married because he was still traumatized by that experience. He also told Jude that he wanted to help him by sponsoring his education at the university to study law and become a lawyer. James offered Jude to come live with him and said he would adopt Jude as his younger brother. But they also needed to teach Sarah and her family a lesson so that women all over the world, especially in Africa, would stop using men and then dumping them. In the days that followed, Jude moved in with James, who treated him very well. Jude sued Sarah for breach of promise to marry, and the court mandated that Sarah return all the money Jude had spent on her. Sarah and her parents could not raise the money, which amounted to about 11 million naira. As a result, Sarah was remanded in Ikoyi prison. James helped Jude pay the legal fees, and although Sarah's parents came regularly to beg Jude and James, they did not budge. A few months later, Jude got admission into the university to study law, and he was so excited. James was happy for him as well. James paid for everything, and Jude was incredibly grateful to James for supporting him through school, from the first year until he graduated and even went to law school. When Jude graduated from law school and became a barrister, Sarah was still in prison because she could not raise the money to pay off her debt. After a while, Jude felt mercy for her and decided to drop all charges against her, leading to Sarah's release. When Sarah came out of prison, she looked in. She discovered that her parents had died while she was in prison and that her brother Victor now roamed the streets, hanging out with bad boys, drinking, and smoking. She was so sorry and wished she had not jilted Jude. She was always crying and became depressed. She later learned that James was now married to a beautiful woman and had 2 sons, and that Jude was about to marry a beautiful young lady named Precious, whom he had met in law school. Sarah wept bitterly. She had lost everything, her parents, her brother, and both men, James and Jude. She wished she could turn back the hands of time. Thank you for watching my story to the end. Please let me know in the comment section, do you think Sarah really deserved the karma that she got? After all, she was only 17 years old when she promised to marry Jude. Please let me know what you think in the comments, and please support my channel by subscribing, liking, and sharing my story with your loved ones. Bye bye.